The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
It's been an interesting start to 2026 in terms of like what we've been doing in the 2 months to start it off. I had a murder trial right off the bat that I was in the courtroom for, which was a double homicide that had a really strange split verdict. We may come back to that one. But the Brendan Banfield trial, it did happen.
It did, and I watched the entire thing.
I saw all of it. I missed the day. I'm got to catch back up on that day, but I understand what happened that day from like the summaries. But at this point in time, everybody knows the verdict has happened. And Brendan Banfield was found guilty on all counts.
Correct. And he testified, which his defense was one of self-defense, even though, self-defense and the defense of others, right?
Right.
And typically, when those cases go to trial, the defendant has to testify because the facts presented without some sort of substantial witness, which usually would have to be the defendant, there's been factual information presented to a grand jury where they said, like, these criminal charges could go forward. And so self-defense and the defense of others is a defense that has to be raised, right?
Right.
So in order to do so, they have to do it. Somebody has to do it. Somebody has to testify. And in this case, the au pair girlfriend, she testified against him, right?
Right. And just like the quickest summary we can get out of here without interrupting you too much is this is the au pair murders we talked about at length in multiple episodes where there's a double homicide. And the idea was that the au pair and the young child of a couple, the man in the couple had come back in and a man was quote unquote attacking, end quote, the wife of the couple that apparently there was a profile on a fetish site where what's presented to us is the wife had set up a very early morning meeting that was sort of violent in nature, but it was going to be ultimately a consensual sexual encounter, and that the defense presents a story where the husband catches this man taking advantage of that consensual encounter and killing the wife, and then kills the man, and it becomes a mess. You and I never thought this was going to go to trial. The au pair got a plea deal for manslaughter, ultimately, to testify against Brendan Banfield, the man in the couple, and that's kind of where we pick up with what you were saying. The au pair is testified.
Correct. And just to point out, she was offered to walk if she testified initially, and she refused to do so. She was in a relationship with Brendan Banfield, and she thought that they were going to be together. She thought
they were going to get away with this, apparently, at some point.
Well, so did he. It's not a situation they ever would have gotten away with, I don't think. Now, there is one sort of pivotal moment where we've talked about this case sporadically. It's been in the news section, right? Because it's so crazy. But it's made our true crime news. And essentially everything was confirmed during the trial. And I feel like Juliana, who is the au pair, she testified truthfully, I feel like. And the defense for Brendan Banfield, the defense counselor, I think he was pushing the wrong buttons as far as the communication he was having with her on the stand and how he thought the jury was interpreting it versus how it was probably actually being interpreted. Because Juliana was not a member. She was a participant in the au pair program. And that is where usually I think it's young women come from other countries. And so English is her second language. She's from Brazil and her native language is Portuguese.
Right.
And so because of that, she's fluent and completely capable of speaking in English. It's just, you can tell she's not a native English speaker, and she more than likely, in my opinion, learned English later in life. And so when people learn a language later in life, and I don't know where she's at in this process. It's just the best way I can explain sort of what happened with regard to her testimony. When you learn a language later in life, you don't necessarily think in that language. And so when you're translating it in your mind, like connotations and the subtleties of, having a conversation, they can be picked up or put down the wrong way.
100%. And I think so. It heavily affects, while I agree with the translation situation, it heavily affects the cross-examination and the direct testimony to a degree to be asked questions about a situation like this. I think there's a high level of anxiety that comes with this when you're in a situation, first of all, where someone is being killed. Second of all, where you've been caught by the police and like there are expectations of how the truth is going to come out. And then there's also expectations that your words being used as the truth are not just being used to verify your story and decide your punishment. They're the linchpin in the punishment of another person. And then it's further compounding the issues because you're in a romantic relationship to that person and you have been either duped or you've gone along with something so horrific that like shock is different. It's clearly worn on her, like the way she's answering questions, her appearance overall, everything has worn on her in this situation. And it kind of all comes out, spilling out when she's being cross-examined by a defense attorney who, honestly, he did the job of a guy that like knew we should be negotiating a plea, but instead, like we've gone to trial. And like he's having her read all these messages back and forth between herself and her family and some of the Banfield family. And it is one of the most spectacular judicial disasters that I've seen in a very long time. And if you have time to sit down and watch it, you should watch the whole trial.
I agree. In her testimony, she's confused about not just with the defense, but also with the prosecution. She is 25 years old at this point in time, but she was 21 when she came as an au pair, I believe. And so if you take that into consideration, she's pretty young is my point, but she is 25 years old. And the defense attorney and the prosecutor, they'd ask her questions. And she repeatedly said on the stand, do I have to be 100% sure? Can I answer this question if I'm not 100% sure? And nobody would answer her, which, I mean, they really shouldn't. And the judge kind of at some point said, ma'am, I just need you to answer the question. Right. And so she stated on the stand after she had said that probably 10 or more times between the two different, the direct, the cross, the redirect, the recross. After she had said that many times saying, if I just think I know, but I'm not 100% sure, can I answer it? And nobody would tell her like, no, don't answer it. She said like out loud, look, I've already told you, I don't know for sure, and I don't know if I can like sort of say who I think it more likely was. Like, because basically the questions were, did you write this message or did Brendan? And she'd say, well, some of them I can kind of tell are more like me and some are more like him, but I don't know for sure. Can I answer it? And the attorney took that to say she was basically telling him on the stand she wasn't going to answer any of his questions. And I was like, that's not what she's saying at all. Like,
no, not only was it not what she's saying, she just like, she was so confused by, like, look, our legal process in the United States, the whole concept of a trial, having a jury brought in, going through like the whole sort of presentation of the trial is confounding. It is like strange if you grew up in the United States and you have watched every episode of Law and Order. So it was particularly confounding to watch this very young and, I don't want to say dumb, but naive comes to mind. Girl.
Yeah, naive is a good word.
And like, you know, she is sort of stuck and having to like you could clearly tell she does not want to be here. She just also does not want to be in jail. And
correct. And the reason I think her testimony was so credible is because if she had flipped, so to speak, at the very beginning, she would have walked away. They weren't going to charge her.
Correct.
Okay, because if you recall, in this case, the idea was Brendan Banfield returned to the home after the au pair called him and said, hey, there's a weird car here and some man's going in the house. And Brendan alleged that the weird man that they didn't know was killing his wife. He therefore shot him. And then later on, Juliana shot him as well. And so when she shot him, he was already incapacitated. She was charged with like second-degree murder or something to that effect, I believe,
yes.
Initially. But the idea was they wanted to get Brendan to confess or to take a plea because he was the mastermind behind it. And at first she wouldn't do it. And it comes out during the trial that the only way she's able to talk with her family in Brazil is because she hasn't like flipped on Brendan yet. And Brendan's mother is providing her with the money that she needs on her account in jail to talk to her family in Brazil. And
and apparently had been paying for her legal services.
Right. She also obtained an attorney, which she thought that. So it's a little bit confusing, but at first she thought she was going to be together with Brendan. But if you recall, she was arrested substantially sooner than he was. Right. Because she had basically confessed to shooting Joe Ryan in a way that wasn't conducive to claim self-defense. Right. Because once you've satisfied once you've neutralized the threat,
right,
you can't kill someone just to kill them. For example, in this case, the first shot took him down in a way that he was no longer a threat. And just because he was moving doesn't mean that the threat was continuing. And, you know, it's kind of an interesting topic because a lot of people, and myself included, I previously believed in the fact that you could absolutely, you know, kill someone that's in your house that's not supposed to be there. But that's not really the case. You can neutralize a threat, but you have to do so in the least deadly way possible, I guess. Is that the way you say it?
That's the way that you would say it. We've kind of been taught by TV and movies that, like, it's okay to shoot someone when they're down.
Right, but that's not the case. Like, if you shoot someone and kill them on the first shot, that's that. But if you shoot someone who is a threat in your home and, like, you're supposed to call, like, for an ambulance immediately. Yes. And that kind of thing. And so in this case, her case was the one that was cut and dry. And she initially did not flip on Brandon. They maintained the position that Christine, the wife who was the victim, had independently set up this rendezvous with Joe Ryan. And she did so in a way that between her husband leaving at 7 a.m. and her a pair and daughter, 4-year-old daughter, leaving, shortly thereafter. At 7:20 a.m., she was going to meet this random man who was going to come into her house because she had left the door unlocked, and they were going to have this FET life encounter, which it stands for fetish life or whatever, and which to me it wasn't plausible from the very beginning. She was the mom.
You kind of held right. You held that the mom of a small child is not going to spend her 7 to 9 a.m. morning time.
That's not when she's going to set up
encounter.
Exactly. Right. She's not going to do that. And not to mention the fact this was a sight unseen meeting, which means they did not meet in public to begin with. A lot of the trial kind of focuses on how that was kind of, you and I talked about how Christine was Joseph Ryan's unicorn. Joseph Ryan was Brendan Banfield's unicorn because of the fact most people, even on FetLife, they want to meet ahead of time. They want to.
There's a level of security and safety. Yes.
Correct. And I promise you the premise that Christine Banfield would have ever invited a man from FetLife to come to the home she shared with her 4-year-old daughter is it's a very, very small statistical probability that she ever would have done that. Much
Let alone
less
doing the actions that we're expected to believe if all of that were to be true.
Oh yeah, no, this was a tragic, just really not thought out situation. And I'm so surprised by it because Brendan Banfield has relied on his intelligence his entire life, I would say. And that's been his whole thing as far as, because he testifies and he talks and he talks and talks and talks. And I think he never had a self-awareness check in this whole situation because nothing he's saying makes any sense. And I can't believe that anybody listening to him would ever think it made any sense. But to him, it's I thought my trial was going to already have happened and I would already be out of here. And it was crazy because he's the only one that's buying what he's putting down.
Yeah.
And it was bad from the jump. And I think Juliana at some point, I'm not sure what changed her mind. She says during the trial she's going to do the right thing by testifying. That's what she ultimately said. She got a 10-year sentence. And considering, and that was from a plea deal. I don't know that she's been sentenced yet, but that's what's going to happen. And considering the fact that they were going to let her walk away if she flipped immediately and gave them the story, it's not like her situation got better.
No, she even complains about so this is something that happens that people may or may not know. If you retain an attorney, you're paying for their time. So people think I'm going to use the word paid attorney versus appointed attorney, but really a paid attorney is someone that's been retained by you or your family for your situation. And an appointed attorney, in most cases, when you're dealing with a murder case, that's going to be someone who is a public defender, frequently a capital defender, and you're going to probably get more from that relationship than you would for most retained attorneys, unless they just happen to be murder attorneys or death charge attorneys. And she complained about that. She complained about a number of things just related to the fact that she hadn't seen him, they hadn't brought her anything, but that attorney brought her a deal that was basically, hey, if you testify against Brendan Banfield, who is apparently paying my bill, then you'll go home. And if you don't, then you're going to trial. And so that was the best deal that could have come out of this. And she ended up testifying against them anyways, and now has to go do a significant prison sentence.
Right. And she wanted her, it was a very strange, I could tell her youth based on the messages, because she wants her attorney to come see her so she has a visitor.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing. She's like, oh, and his laptop was dead and blah, 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 blah. And I get what she's saying. And, keeping in mind.
Because the defense attorney is making her read her messages to her family that have been translated from Portuguese into English, because she's talking to her family in her native language. And you can tell on the stand that she's thinking and wanting to respond in her native language and forcing herself to translate into English.
Correct. And so this is all in the past and what's going on. And you can tell that at that point she was still maintaining that she had, there was no plan, that she just did what Brendan said to do. And this is where she ends up. And it comes up that she is looking to make a deal for her financial future based on everything she's been through.
Right.
And that was an interesting kind of pivot, which the defense attorney was making the point that ooh, you're going to make $10,000 off of your role in this story. The prosecutor comes back and says, well, but is $10,000 really a lot of money in Brazil? What have you done to your life? Which is essentially, people in Brazil have less opportunity to begin with.
Right.
In a lot of cases, which is exactly why the au pair program exists, to bring, to take young ladies from one country to another country so they can have perhaps other opportunities, but it also is culture exposure, right? And she has basically flushed everything down the toilet because she's going to have this conviction, right? And she's going to be immediately deported when she gets out of jail because she's overstayed her welcome here.
Right. And so the defense attorney wants us to believe that this person that Meg just so aptly described to us is the diabolical mastermind who put all of this together. Because that's the other thing that happens when you wait till the eve of trial and you kind of just jump in head first because you don't know exactly how the prosecutor is going to present the case, is the defense attorney, if you don't have a solid plan, you end up having to sort of cross wires and piecemeal your story together. And it shows so much during the cross-examination of Juliana. And I cannot explain to you how much of a disaster it is, but I firmly believe that the defense attorney thinks it's going to come across that way, and it doesn't. So in addition to Juliana and her ability to communicate coming across oddly to a jury, as Meg aptly pointed out, it also comes across as if Banfield, the defendant here, completely took advantage of this girl the entire time. And I'm not knocking her. I called it naive earlier. I think youth plays into this and makes that naivete double. And I think that she never thought all of these things were actually going to happen.
I think you're probably right, because who would?
Yeah, till the moment you're standing there and for some reason Brendan Banfield has set all this up. It did work. You are heart is pounding out of your head and gunshots start being fired and you witness Banfield stabbing his wife, essentially. I don't know that she had any clue what was happening up until that point.
I don't think she did, honestly. I think that, I think the way that again, I feel like the fact that Portuguese is her native language and English is a secondary language I think that plays in here. I think that while they might have had these affair daydreams and stuff, I think that at the end of what happened, she was probably wow, I can't believe that actually happened. And I also think she had the gun specifically in case somehow Joseph Ryan got the situation turned around on Brendan Banfield and Juliana. because he was concerned that he wouldn't be able to do what he was trying to do, which would be kill Joseph Ryan and then murder Christine Banfield in a way that made it look like Joseph Ryan had killed her, and that's why he had killed him. The defense attorney, he tried to emphasize, first of all, that there was no plan, and second of all, that if there was a plan, that Juliana was responsible for the plan. She had orchestrated it all, right? And pick a lane, right? I mean, none of that made any sense to anybody. And it's weird that a guy who had relied on his intelligence his entire life would have come up with such a stupid plan.
And that's the other thing about this trial. I encourage people, like we're synopsizing this in like 40 minutes to an hour chunks. Watching the whole thing is an experience where you will walk away learning a lot about the state of humanity. And I say that because we learned things in this trial that, like, if you were to tell me, like, in other circumstances, I would never believe you. For instance, it turns out that Christine Banfield, one of the decedents, one of the victims in this case, was a sexual assault nurse examiner for one of the things that she had done in her nursing career. Another thing was that Brendan Banfield had been having affairs. He doesn't look like a guy that, in my opinion, I mean, he's completely average. There's nothing super creepy about him, except for his stoicism throughout this process where it becomes more and more obvious that he's done this. He basically was having an affair on, the mother of his child. And because he wanted some kind of different life that he doesn't ever really even explain to the person he's asking to commit these atrocious crimes with him. Some vague stuff about money and custody comes up, but realistically, like, we discover he's been having these affairs, and like, do you imagine him as a guy that's like suave and affairs make sense?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, it just gets worse the more, and then he talks and it gets worse.
Oh, it's so bad. And he made it seem like the affair part was run of the mill. And of course, that kind of contradicts the fact that, like, if it was so run of the mill that, Christine was probably just having an affair, that's why this random guy showed up at the house, then why did he go there?
Why did he shoot him?
Why did he confront him? Well, because he was killing her, supposedly. But the other part is, like, Joseph Ryan had found his unicorn in Christine Banfield, even though it wasn't really her. Like, she was somebody, a beautiful woman who was trying to orchestrate something that Joseph Ryan was actually on FetLife trying to find, like a real person, right?
Some version of it, yeah.
Right. And so he, like, hit the FetLife lottery.
He kind of did until he didn't.
It wasn't real, right? None of it was real because, like, and it's depicted in the messages that kind of come out during court, like, this type of thing. Essentially, if you were to believe that it was Christine Banfield who did it, she would have gotten online, messaged with a guy, and said, hey, okay, I want to do this. We're going to do this fake rape scene, and the way we're going to orchestrate it is I'm going to be at home sleeping, the front door is going to be unlocked, you're going to come in, you've got to bring everything with you, and we're going to do this in my bedroom. Right. Well, he's going, I mean, for one thing, I don't know anything about this type of lifestyle in this community that has, come together online, but most of the people that they interacted with, they said that was too much, like that they weren't willing to do it. They had to do a meet and greet in a public place first, right?
Right.
And Joseph Ryan parked I believe it was his mother's vehicle in the Banfield driveway. He left identifying stuff right there.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no indication whatsoever that he was actually going to harm Christine in any way, shape, or form. He thought he was going there for a sexual rendezvous that was completely consensual and set up between the two of them.
Right. And we're not, just for the record, we're not kink shaming. We're
No,
not
nothing at all.
we are pointing out the absurdity of setting up this type of triple entendre murder. So on the one hand, you have to develop the scenario that like these two people were meeting, and then you have to develop a secondary scenario where one of those people was sort of not doing what had been agreed upon, and he was quote unquote killing the person that he's meeting, which takes the absurdity to like level 5, and then you have to.
He would have really, for his role in this, like that's not something he would have done. Like he was in it for the fantasy of the encounter. There was no reason for him to kill her.
Right. And then the third part of the entendre is then you have the hero husband coming in and saving the day, except everyone's dead.
But then as the au pair girlfriend shoots Joseph Ryan the kill shot, not the defense shot, the kill shot, because she panicked and she didn't understand the concept of the fact that just because he was moving because he needed medical attention was not a signal for her to shoot, which I am not so sure if she had not shot him
that we would be here.
I don't know for sure how it would have gone, because
I think it might have been Joseph Ryan being arrested and having to prove his innocence that he didn't kill Christine Banfield.
It could have been. It very well could have been. I don't know for sure, but I do think that it was, you know, the amount of time that went by, the fact that like there was another gun. I mean, you know, if you remember back when we first saw like the news, I don't think we saw it when it happened. Maybe we did, but I think we saw it as the au pair as Juliana was arrested for it. I think that's when we first started kind of covering it in the news. I'm not really sure actually now that I think about it. But it was a strange thing, because why did he have a gun and why did she have a gun? And come to find out, he is an IRS
special agent, or trying to be a special agent.
And they are law enforcement, like they're sworn law enforcement officers who carry guns and badges. And so that's why he had a gun. And then she had a gun because he had given it to her and she had put it in her pocket. And so,
well, that was one of the other things I think was a miscommunication between the au pair and Brandon Banfield, because I think Juliana was supposed to get the gun. It was supposed to be somewhere in the house locked away, and it turned out it wasn't. She was carrying it on her person to the zoo that day.
Which she was never going to the zoo, but
right.
And he told her she testifies that he told her to, I feel like when it was like clear that the confrontation was over, so before she shot him, he told her to go put the gun up. I think because he was like shouting out the numbers to the safe to her. That's what she testified to. It was weird. We couldn't figure out what exactly he was saying. I think he was saying, hey, go put the gun away because you don't need it. Because the only thing he was concerned about is, what if somehow Joseph Ryan can turn the situation around on him? Yeah. Because he's confronting a guy he doesn't know in his bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And like, what if there had been anything about Joseph Ryan that had caused him to be able to defensively react to Brendan Banfield at that moment? He wanted Juliana to be able to shoot him if necessary. He did not want her to take a kill shot unnecessarily, because that brought in just a whole lot of other
complications.
And I told you kind of flippantly, I was like, yeah, he probably should have translated that part in Portuguese so she really understood what he was saying, because all he was telling her, she was just an insurance plan with the gun. He didn't want her to shoot him as well. It took me a long time to wrap my mind, or actually I never did until trial, because I was like, why would she have shot him later? And then she like told, when she's talking, she's completely honest about all this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it's sort of like, wait, what? And she thought, you can tell from her testimony, she thought the sign of him moving was an indication that he was still alive and they weren't going to get away with their plan, which is why she shot him, which is terrible. And she made no bones about it during the testimony. However, Brendan's version of that when he testified was that she shot him because he was going to hit him in the shoulder, or he had hit him in the shoulder blades or something. It was ridiculous. I believe that the medical examiner testified that Joseph Ryan, he was shot in the head and he would have been blinded, I believe is what they said.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have been able to see. And it was a confusing situation. Anyway, Brendan Benfield testified that he came in the room and shouted, "Federal law enforcement," or something like that. Stop. What did he say?
It was something ridiculous. I don't know the exact quote.
He had his gun drawn and he said, law enforcement, stop what you're doing, federal officer, something like that. It was like, he probably had waited his entire life to do that. And so, they were confused. Well, supposedly, according a mixture of Juliana's testimony and Brendan's testimony indicates that Christine said something to the effect of, Brendan, he has a knife, and that Christine told Juliana to call 911, and she did. Like
she called 911. Yeah, she did.
And so that gives you an idea of how crazy it was, because Juliana called 911 and Brendan told her to stop the call. He gave her the Nix sign, where you're telling somebody
you draw your thumb across your throat.
Right. And then, so the icing on the cake, one of the most repulsive things I've ever seen in my entire life was Brendan Banfield recounting Christine Banfield's last moments.
Yeah.
And he said that she took his hand and put it on the huge hole she was bleeding out from in her neck. And then she put his other hand on top of it, and they'd have this whole hand thing going on, and that she told him that she loved him and that she was sorry. And the medical examiner had testified that more than likely she would have been rendered unable to speak, not to mention the fact that she had 5 stab wounds. Yeah. And the situation, as it were, so Brendan is saying that Joe Ryan did those stabs. Well, even the testimony, his lying testimony, did not line up to a situation that would have allowed Joseph Ryan 5 stabs to make all those wounds. In other words, some of those stabs happened after Joseph Ryan had been shot. And so that made no sense. And, it was insulting because in real life, which I get this happened, but none of this was real life except that the 2 victims died, right? The rest of it was all completely fantasy land. But he didn't say please tell our daughter I love her.
Yeah.
He didn't bring anything up about their 4-year-old daughter. And that really was kind of the, if you're going to lie and make up her last words anyway, at least make it not about you. But everything about this case was about him. Everything was him.
Yeah. And it has the ending that it should have. And that is, he's been found guilty. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison.
Correct. And he was found guilty on all the charges that they finally ended up presenting. The charging documents and the jury instructions is actually quite confusing. Yeah. Because I think there was some ambiguity with regard to one of the charges. One of the charges was you had to have, it was 2 murders in the same activity.
3-year activity period.
Something like that. And the judge was trying to explain to the prosecutor how that's just one charge. That's both murders, but one charge, right?
Yeah.
And so it was confusing. But anyway, everything they presented, including, I believe they ended up going with the child endangerment as opposed to the child of neglect or abuse.
Right.
And so he was found guilty of that as well, because he absolutely was guilty of that. He was in charge of that situation. And it was so weird how he just really couldn't even take responsibility for the fact that, like, his daughter never should have been in the house when that was happening.
Or never been exposed to that because it never happened in the first place is what the ideal situation.
Oh yeah, but like, even so if you think about this, which it's pointless to do because it's all bad, there was no reason for Juliana to be there, much less the 4-year-old daughter. In this setup, he could have done it all himself and taken himself down, right?
Actually, if he would have done it all himself, it probably would not have gotten the scrutiny that it did.
You're right. Part of the initial of my initial interest in this case was the bizarre nature of how it unfolded, right?
Right.
Because having been a mom and a nanny, I know for a fact that anytime I had driven like an hour or something and realized I forgot lunches, I would be buying lunch that day. I would not be turning around and going back. That was the very first thing. I was like, that makes absolutely no sense. And so based on that, like, you know, my radar was going off. And I don't know how much I agree with. I feel like they could have probably made this case somehow. And I'm not so I feel like the nanny got, you know, what she got. I feel like she was duped, but that doesn't change the fact that essentially she shot Joe Ryan in cold blood. She should have known he wasn't a risk, right?
Yeah.
And I do understand that that is a situation most of us are never going to face, and we never would really even process it. But, you know, they set that situation up to begin with, and she was killing him because he wasn't dead yet, not because he was going to hurt somebody.
Yeah, so it's especially aggravated murder. That's what I think you were getting at with. So they get an aggravating factor out of the fact that he used a firearm in the commission of a violent felony, and then they get the fact that he commits 2 in their prescribed period of time, which I believe in Virginia is 3 years, but in this case it's essentially 10 minutes. He commits 2 murders, and they do find him guilty of the crimes for having his kid in the house while he's doing this. I look at this and I think the reason you're saying why you were fascinated with it, I think I'm just fascinated with multiple murders. I've always been that way. I understand the things that happen between 2 people and how you end up with a murder or an accidental death or some other type of violent confrontation. What I didn't understand from the jump was like how you get this other guy in the mix. And I thought it was going to be explained because, like, you and I've heard different things along the way. There was a shuffling of the local police department at one point. There was all these defense allusions that potentially there had been evidence that it was only Christine Banfield on her devices. And all of that sort of fell apart when it finally gets to trial. And we even had mentioned the prosecutor that was originally on this case had some very serious personal issues, including being drunk during the day. But I got to be honest, I don't, if I were working this type of case and had gotten this far with it and was this annoyed with it, I might be drinking during the day too. It's that kind of case. And at the end of the day, so to clarify, it is absolutely horrible the way Christine Banfield died. It must have been so confusing. But the thing that I think draws me in so much here is Joseph Ryan in his last moments must have been so confused before his incredibly tragic death as to like what was happening. Like he showed up because he thought he was going to have some type of casual encounter related to something he had been talking to someone about and made like all the things clear. And that person had asked him to do a specific set of things. So in his mind, whether that was his thing or like he was just like, you know what, I can get into this because she's beautiful and I dig this or whatever, the last moments when those shots were fired must have been chaotic.
And horrifying.
Absolutely horrifying. What a terrible way to die for those two.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually one of the worst that I've ever. I wouldn't even imagine this type of situation.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have either. I don't have a lot more on that right now. I thought it would be more of a case that I would want to do a deep dive into, but the truth is, at the end of it all, it was pretty self-explanatory.
And it had been all along.
Yeah.
And it was a waste. All of it was a waste. And I hate it that they couldn't have realized that earlier. I feel like maybe if Juliana had been a little bit older and a little less taken advantage of, she would have been like, no, what are you talking about? We're not doing this, right? But she wasn't in that type of position. That Brendan Banfield was essentially her boss, right?
Right.
And none of these things are ever going to work out. It's always a bad idea. And it just seems like a waste that didn't need to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I've been, to give a little preview, I've been really sucked into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. You?
Oh my goodness, what happened to her?
I don't know. I've been looking at these Scottsdale Bitcoin home invasions and wondering if all that's tied together.
Yeah, it's a little bit. So I've seen sort of mixed commentary on it, where people are like, oh, why is this a big deal? Why is this in the news? Okay, so an 84-year-old woman who lives alone being taken in the middle of the night is absolutely newsworthy. It has nothing to do with anything else. The fact that, because that doesn't happen very often. Okay, I realize that, older people go missing, but like they wander off. It's not typically a situation where somebody is taken from their bed at night.
Right.
Okay, that's an odd thing. There's not a whole lot of motive, not just for Nancy Guthrie, but like for any 84-year-old woman to be taken in their sleep, except for money, which is unclear at this point if that's really what the motive is or not, because they're taking weird ways of, if it's even the people who have taken her, if it's even them, like it doesn't seem like they're directly communicating with the children that they would need to be communicating with, because from what I've seen, the children are ready and willing to talk with them, and they're going to like TMZ and other local news places, and they need to talk with the kids, right? So I don't know if that's going to end up being for real, but I just don't see the motive otherwise. Yeah. I have played that situation over and over in my head, and there's got to be something to it, but I don't know that it's going to end up being a stranger.
Yeah, I'm torn on all of that right now. I haven't seen enough. I don't know enough about the situation from the family perspective to know if it would be like a direct family member. But like the reason I brought up the other Arizona stuff that's going on is because they were doing some similar things. They were coming in dressed as package delivery people, but that's usually like broad daylight, not late at night.
Exactly.
You've got this whole, maybe the Ring camera was turned off thing that's happening. You've got a number of things that like, it sounds terrible for me to even say it this way, but like, I'm wondering, like, is this ushering in like a new type of like horrifying thing to have on your list of fears.
Well, fortunately, so the Ring camera was actually apparently ripped off of the door of the frame that holds it to the door. I don't know if it was a Ring camera. The doorbell camera was ripped off of the doorbell holder camera. The
Right.
doorbell camera holder. Okay, so here's what will come from that. There will be an update that will show the last thing the camera saw before it was ripped off, right? Now, they said the account for this one wasn't set up. Supposedly, that's why they can't see it. I don't know. I hear things, and then I also hear the sheriff say, like, we've given out zero information, so nobody knows anything, right?
Yeah.
And so I hear things, but there were pictures of the doorbell camera frame without the doorbell there. There was blood on the porch. There was a notification, probably on her phone, that said a person had been detected on a camera at 2 something or another.
Yeah.
So that would have been a different camera than the doorbell camera. And it makes me think that, again, it didn't register. I thought, and this might have been true at some point and changed, I thought that Ring had certain footage even if you didn't subscribe. Ring has also, grown monumentally in the past 10 years. So they may not keep footage. I don't even know that this is a Ring camera necessarily, but it seems like that's a pretty worthless thing to have the doorbell cam have information that they can't get.
Well, so I don't know what doorbell camera it is, but I do know. So at least 2 companies here where I live and work, one of them heavily involves law enforcement in their networking. And I know that because I have to write those requests. And basically you can get 7 days worth of footage off of any of their doorbell cameras. The other
even if they've been removed, no.
Yeah. Like it's
Okay.
like 7 days worth of information. Even like some of it's pretty brief. Like if they have no subscription and like they're really not using the doorbell camera, etc. Like it might just be 30-second clips that you get, but you can get those clips anytime there's like all the activation of that camera, ever how it's set up. And there's different ways to set them up. But like I can get 7 days, and I'm saying that kind of leaning, I think it's Ring that does that. They have like a whole law enforcement network that you can opt in, opt out of. So I'm not saying this person was or wasn't opted in or opted out, whoever like set up this Ring account. But like you can get it even if they don't keep it on an SD card or in a personal cloud account. You can get 7 days worth of footage. And, that's my experience so far. The other company, like you can get 90 days worth, but there's you end up basically having to have a court order to get it. Like there's not a real high functioning law enforcement relationship between the company and local agencies here. I don't know if that's nationwide or not. I just know here. But the bottom line is like, if there's a camera, it's connected to the internet. So those 2 things have to be true. Then more than likely, information is being kept.
That's exactly what I thought.
But that case is fascinating me. There's another trial that we're probably going to talk about soon that you, I guess, picked up on. I think you said that you picked up in the middle of it because the Banfield trial when the Banfield trial ended, you kind of just like saw.
Well, when it went to Verdict Watch,
right?
It switched, and suddenly I was in this other trial. Yeah.
And I've seen multiple days of that trial at this point, and I have questions, so that'll probably come up soon. We have a number of other things going on. I'm guessing we end up revisiting Nancy Guthrie. Certainly, if it's connected to the Scottsdale Bitcoin home invasions, I'll be looking at that because they think the perpetrators in those home invasions were being extorted. So that's like a new level.
I don't know. If you got caught for something like that, wouldn't you be shouting that from the rooftops? Like, I was extorted.
They were.
Okay. Well, I didn't know. And so I was just thinking, like, that's convenient for them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, being extorted to do something does not alleviate your responsibility. And I don't know for certain. I don't know if in Nancy Guthrie's case, I don't know if it's going to be a home invasion, if it's going to be a burglary that maybe the person was there when she got home and they hid until later. But there's a pretty tight timeline of events that have been sort of laid out. And then to me, granted, it's kind of sketch, and I realize when I look this up that you can't get the direct information, but somebody's got it. Her pacemaker stopped syncing with her watch.
Her Apple Watch, yeah.
Okay. And at that exact moment is when she was out of range, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And so in theory, they have different things pinpointed along the way. I don't think that doorbell cameras don't monitor doors being opened usually.
No, that not unless they're part of a package that like there's some way to signal that. No.
Yeah. Well,
but they would still have essentially a very tight timeline of events because of all those things you just mentioned.
Well, right, but and so I guess my point is she could have only gotten so far, like, and they should be able to tell. And I have no idea what the pacemaker syncing, what that distance would be like, because when I looked it up, all it says is like, you need to keep it like 6 inches away from your pacemaker. That's what the Apple Watch needs to stay 6 inches away at all times or something like that. So I was having trouble getting like, how many meters it was that you can go away from it before it stops syncing. But that would give them valuable insight to the method in which she was transported. Was she in a car? Did she just walk off? I think that they pretty much my initial inclination in this case was that it would be more likely that she somehow got hurt, hit her head or something, and left on her own accord than it being some sort of weird abduction. That does not appear to be what happened. They said she was very mentally sharp and she had mobility issues. And so if you could calculate how far she had to have been, because they have the exact time it quit syncing.
Yeah.
You would have an idea. You could draw a radius around the house and you could say, okay, at this point, she crossed the line in this circle somewhere, right?
Yeah.
My guess is it's only probably two ways, right? Like either one direction on the road or the other direction on the road. Now, it's odd that she didn't. Well, I guess maybe if the perpetrator was in charge, he didn't allow her to take the stuff. Maybe he forced her to take the watch off. I don't know. But it's odd, and it doesn't seem like it should be possible, especially since she does have cameras at her house. How could she have been taken and nobody know who it is, right? It's horrifying.
Yeah, the whole thing is horrifying. I'm hoping that there's going to be a positive end. I may have to edit this episode because of the timing of it and when it's going to come out. I don't know if we'll know what's happened or not. But I think I will swing back around to that just because of the high-profile nature of this type of missing persons case that appears to, in all likelihood, have been an abduction.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrottieCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't yeah, it's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at truecrimeaccess.com. Thank you for joining us.